Unorthodox best practices. So why the topic? Because it's not best practices. What I actually am doing in projects, and what I often hear is, you are crazy, you cannot do this. So this is unusual best practices. And about me, I really enjoy Java. I don't know why. From the beginning, actually. I started actually with C and C++. And then I saw Java, and this was like a magnet to me. So I just, oh, this is the real thing, and just stick with Java. Why? I have no idea. Probably of the art, the logo with the coffee and some microsystems, everything together. So Java was for me a crazy thing from the beginning. And now I enjoy it a little bit more because I understand a little bit more. At the beginning it was black magic, and now it's probably just magic. So about me. Many suspect I had a chat in someone from Poland conference. They suspected me that I'm working silently for Oracle or for some microsystem or whatever, which is absolutely not true. I'm working as a contractor since 1997. I'm a freelancer and one-man show. So I don't know what there's something like this in Poland. It's like I don't have a company. I just have a company which I'm the company actually. Without there is like limited something. This is not this. I'm just a company by my own. And what I usually do, I try 80% of my time spent in projects to make something. Usually what I do, Java. So usually what I do is Java 7, surprisingly this year. Java 6, almost no Java 5, and JT214 just migrations to Java 6. And a little bit Java mix, lots of RESTful web services, stuff like this, a little bit Angular, HTML, and crazy stuff. So I spend time coding, architecting. This is what I do all the time. And this is the reason why I try to avoid conferences. Who invited me and say, come on, do you take more than workshops? That is not about workshops. I have to work, you know. I have to deliver something. So I wrote this book, and you saw this book. This is actually as thin as the slide. And to save time, I organize 3 times a year workshops at Munich Airport. And the first time ever came developers from Saudi Arabia. And my bank called me, say, why you have deals with Saudi Arabia? No, just workshops. So which workshop? On the airport? What are you doing in the airport? like NSA. But really, there is some from Poland. I have some attendees, India, USA, and I would say 30% from Germany. The next one is March, and this is the last slide actually, because I don't believe in slides, right? So I try to spend a little bit more than usual in slides. And this is thank you, and this is the references. If you would like, use the Twitter handle. I'm at GitHub, but this is a mess. I just try things out, and everything what I try is on GitHub. And yeah, execute workshops. What I would like to do is, I want to hack a little bit Java 6 and Java 7 code, and what I would expect from you are critical questions, theoretical questions. You are stupid, why are you doing this way? And why not this, why not this? And those are the best discussions going this way. Otherwise, I will show you something and everyone say yes, yes, yes. No, you should ask me, always challenge me. This is what I like the most. It's the most fun for everyone. Agreed? Okay, so the first crazy resolution we have here. So in Germany we have a 640 like 480, you know, there is a one letter like this, and here I don't know 2K or what do you have? So let's start with Maven. Just the first unusual thing. In Java E context, just in Java E context, I really like Maven, probably JavaFX. If you have more challenging stuff, I will probably choose Gradle, something like this. For Java E is Maven just perfect. So whatever I do, I will use Maven right here and hope that internet is working. If not, yeah, it's working. It's no problem. I damage your device here. The problem with Maven is, I had no experience about Poland, so don't be offended. So my experience is from Germany, I would say 80%, Austria and Switzerland, and a little bit Spain, and UK a little bit, but no Poland. So whatever I'm saying is my experience for my projects. But what I see in my projects is, not in Poland, Maven is extremely over-engineered. It's crazy. So the first thing I do, I look at the POM. And this looks like, it's like 2,000 lines of code. All possible plugins there. Some even generate websites from Maven. So it's okay, probably you can also brew some coffee from this or what. And if I ask why the plugin is there, why the lifecycle hook is there, no one knows. So, and what I really do, no kidding, I delete all the crap. And what's remained is what I would like to show you. And I did do it over and over again. And actually on the conference in Poland, what I did, I started a standard Maven for Gen delete everything. And this is just stupid because I did it over and over again. What I did, I created my own Maven archetype with nothing, just minimal stuff. And this is what I always use as a starting point. And this should be natural, actually. Don't start, with 2,000 lines of code, boom. Start with the minimum. This is what you usually learn, agile processes or whatever. This is what we hear at conferences, but it doesn't work that way in practice, at least in German. So, Java Essential, why Airheads? Because I had to submit the archetype to Maven Central. In order to do this, you have to have a working domain, and I have just two. Alan Bean, which is a little bit personal, and Airheads, a little bit, sounds nicer, so I registered nice Airheads, but there's no commercial background or something like this. Probably a little bit. So, workspaces. So everything I do is in junk. If you like, I can send you the junk after the session. And on our docs practice. So, this is pl.wjug. Right? Something like this. And now it should fetch from the internet the wizard. My archetype is just a wizard. And by the way, okay, let's look just at this. And this is what you need for Java 6 and 7. Everything else is, I call that cargo cult. You know what cargo cult is? I have to explain you because this is the most funniest thing I saw actually. Cargo cult, actually the definition is fancy. So this is what I really know. Cargo cult. And the first one was Kulo, was also nice, but cargo cult. Programming. So, and this is what I actually see, and I always refer to as over-engineering. It is not over-engineering, it's cargo cult. It's a style of computer programming characterized by the ritual inclusion of code or program structures that serve no real purpose. And this is from what I see in production. This is cargo cult because no one knows why it's there. And one consultant came to me and to support me, and the first what he did was he introduced a super POM with lots of dependencies and asked him why, and the answer was, one day you will see why. So he was experienced. So really, this is what you should start with. Not everything else is optional. Of course you will get JUnit and Mockito. If you are from Poland, you have to use Mockito, of course. And I use it all the time because it's the easiest thing to use. If you compare with the others, forget it. So Mockito is really I always use Mockito. Sometimes Arcadian. I use JUnit all the time. Why not TestNG? Because everyone knows JUnit and TestNG. I would say only the experts or the fancier developer know TestNG, but JUnit is very popular. And this is what happens, but not at the beginning. And if you start with that, I mean, it is a lot easier to accept by a junior developer, something like this, than POMs of super POMs and modules over modules. Everyone agree? Yeah. Which is strange. So usually say, oh, you're stupid, you have to be modular and whatever. No, right? So just do the...
I think that having a super POM is actually useful. I always make a POM and use dependency management, so I don't define versions of dependencies in modules of the application.
Yeah, it really depends how many modules do you have. And now we are in the discussion about modules. I wanted to address this as well. This, what we have in Germany, I refer to that. I don't actually know whether there is something such a word, modularities, the module disease. And it's a Java sickness, I think. Because what happens, we got in the shortest amount of time 500 modules. And usually, in Germany we get. So, and this is what happens if they move from Ant to Maven, they like the modules so much that they spend all the time, putting everything apart. And I saw modules with one interface and a little bit piece of XML because it could be reusable. And this is stupid because then Maven takes longer. And this is huge complexity. What I don't like in my IDE is a large amount of projects. The best case is one thing: build, deploy. Okay? And so the question is now, How to work in larger teams? And now is the next unusual question or answer or my statement. I don't believe in large teams. You can forget it completely. Whatever what is built in this grade was built by small teams, or even one person. I don't know any example in software development where a large team achieves something great. Right? Right? So, if someone says your crack only worked for smallest teams, is yes, but just small, passionate, not motivated. Passionate and motivated will not experience. I don't care about experience. Java is easy enough to learn it in a few weeks, right? So if you are passionate and motivated, you can build whatever you like. So, and what Yahoo said once, it says, a team has to buy from a pizza. So, and there is another law, it's called the Conway law. And Conway law says that the architecture always reflects the structure of a company. So what you have to do is to build small teams. And the small teams, what is small? 2 to 5 people. 5 people is huge team, I would say. Right? And then in Java 6 would deliver one module, one such modules, one war. So, and then I will try how to communicate with the other wars. So it's not like I introduced an interfaces, because if you introduce an interface, you are already lost. You have already binary dependencies to other modules. What you really need is true decoupling. What true decoupling is RESTful web services, so something similar. Then you have a true decoupling between modules. And it works. So we do it in projects. It works really, really great. But you have to be a little bit more pragmatic. And a little bit of history. So I started in Java 1995 and 1997 my commercial area, so commercial work. And then at the beginning of Java, nothing was sure. So we couldn't rely on database because it was a common sense that relational database would die. This was at the beginning before 2000. So why? Because we had object databases, XML databases, and we have to evaluate, you know, echelon, object store, and whatever was. Who remembers the time? Who was in Java from the beginning? Is there someone? Someone? You are looking for someone convinced? Okay. This is actually a you know, dinosaur technology Java, right? 20 years old. But at the beginning there's also Genie, Java Intelligent Network Infrastructure. We didn't even know whether we get a server. So some of architects dreamt of a fully distributed Internet of Things, actually, what is now popular again. So we have to abstract from everything. So what happened then? We built abstractions of abstractions, always, because we couldn't rely on anything. But right now, we know at least we have JPA, which abstracts. Now we have RESTful web services, and we have packaging, which is somehow standardized. So there is no more need for abstraction. Everyone agree? French. French audience, but okay. You are very pragmatic, so that's French pragmatic. In Germany, you know, some architects who already freak out. So, and by the way, architects should code. You know, just slides. Who cares about slides? This is.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
In your project, will you use maybe multi-model approach or single model?
We what we get usually is several wars, and we have one not super POM, one multi-module POM which builds everything together. But this sub-POMs usually don't have to inherit from the super POM, you know. So you have one Maven POM which just includes the other modules, so you can build conveniently everything. And this is my project, so some projects are older than I, so then I can achieve anything. Some projects which we started together look like this. But in software development, everything which is dogmatic doesn't work. So I would say in large amount of the projects the best way to go, because it can reduce the complexity. And I would even argue at the beginning, I would rather copy, you know, the JUnit version or Mockito version to my POM than be dependent on dependency management. Because how often it changes? JUnit and Mockito, no? And then you can say, okay, but what if you get, I don't know, Jakarta Commons length, on Jakarta Commons whatever, we forbid everything first. So the developer has to think about the dependency before the dependency is included. Why? Because we already have Java 8, and we already have Java E, and this is a huge framework. We can build whatever you like. So each additional dependency introduces new complexity and new risks. Which really is. What means risk? What happened lots of my clients, I would say 5 times so far, that the client was dependent on an external framework, in open source framework, and the open source framework died, and there was no more source code in the internet. So we searched in archives, web archives, whatever, and this was not available. So what we had to do to decompile the code and fix that. So what it means, if you really would like to be dependent on something, you should actually make it buildable on Jenkins. This is your insurance. Never happened to my projects. Just everything is included, not huge tree of cool stuff. And in one, a huge portal was dependent on one GitHub project which was created by one student. So it's actually nice. Yeah. When you were thinking, there was risk management with all the Excels and sheets. It's like, okay, just stop talking, just look what your real dependencies are. Okay, questions? No questions. So, why I use NetBeans? I would use, I have IntelliJ license as well. The problem with IntelliJ, it costs some money. And if we have a larger project, it will take months until we get the license, approved. So the next step is the more pragmatic, is just use NetBeans. You get whatever you like out of the box. Eclipse is nice if you have time to search for plugins. Okay, this is, at the beginning I was delighted because Eclipse was the only IDE with great refactoring support. It was better than JBuild and everything. But right now I lost my patience. And right now it's 5 years. So I use NetBeans, is the pragmatic one, or IntelliJ, both. But if someone uses Eclipse, I use Eclipse, but that is not my choice. Which already, leads to different religious wars. Yeah. How you can not like Eclipse? Take whatever you like, right? So, and the next important thing in projects is don't be dependent on the IDE. So you can use Emacs or VI, which is another interesting topic, right? Or Sublime or Ultraedit or whatever. But the code has to build on Jenkins. Hudson, we could use Hudson, but there's no reason to use it. So Jenkins. It has to build on Jenkins, and then you can use whatever you like. So, and this is the right approach. And then all the discussion stops. Agreed? So from day one, automation. Jenkins mandatory. Maven has to build locally. Jenkins has to build fast. Very fast. So you have to build the fastest server should be the build server. You can save a lot of money. Never happened to Germany. So there's no 2 levels of virtualization, and we got a half core to build, huge projects. And if it takes 2 nights, no one cares because it's just building, and developing will do something else at the time, which is absolutely not true. So Jenkins is the fastest, escalated all the time. And this is actually one of the viewpoints where you can actually prove it to management, then they will save money by having a faster environment. Because if 100 developers are waiting for 5 minutes, 5 minutes is very fast actually for build, then so now it's deployed. There's actually nothing there but to deploy the application. So this was the setup and the first initial deployment. Okay. I would say, let's start with structure. How I structure internally the applications. I would like to introduce you to something, and then I will implement some RESTful web services, and I would like to explain that SOAP is dead. Actually, I don't know any reason it is dead. And then some transactions, JPs and JPA, whatever you would like to see. So we'll hack something and explain how to implement that. Okay, agreed? If you would like to see something else, then we'll do something else. But I think we have 2 hours or something. So it should be okay. So package. Let's actually start with RESTful web services. And the package, in our case, has to be pl.wjug. And what I started to think about whether this is actually required. The dream of Java was that all the packages are what you need. And we in Germany, we can have, COM.de, Siemens, Department of Siemens, and Sub-Department of Siemens, a huge part of the packages before. And it repeats over and over again. So I never did it, but I think about leaving this out. If you're in one company, why writing over and over time, or over again, pl.wjug? If everything is pl.wjug, this is just, don't repeat yourself, it hurts the principle. But I always stick with that right now, but I'm thinking more and more even without. So what we could build the application is how is it called, the bar? Lolek. Zelolek. That is the application name. Then, registration will be my component name. What components are, I will introduce in a second. And I will start with boundary because we have no time. And registrations, resource would be name of the REST web service. So this is the company name, Lolek is the application name, registration is component name, and the boundary. So, what I would like, okay? What are you confused with the Lolek? So he said Lolek. So now we have to configure the RESTful web services. And for unknown reasons, what I see, they are always configured in WebXML, and I don't get it. It's not necessary, not at all. It was never necessary actually, except before in 2006 it was necessary, 8 years ago. But since then, never. So, and for me, I never expect that, and it works magically. And then I go to WebXML and find all the stuff. So, okay, now this is why it works, right? So, application path, and you can use here either the version number or something meaningless like resource. What is the best practice? It depends on your scale. If you're building a web scale, I think it's now the buzzword, web scale application with where you have no control over the clients, you cannot use the version number because each change will break all the clients. If you can control the clients, use the version number. So this is actually it was a larger topic, but basically the larger the audience, the less type safe the API can be. This is my observation over time. Because if everything is type safe, small changes break all the clients. This is not what you need, or what you like, or what your product owners would like. Oh, to product owner and processes, right? I don't know whether you also Scrumified as it is in Germany. There were, 2 years ago everything was waterfall, or 5 years ago, and now they changed everything to Scrum, or named the waterfall to Scrum. and they have, instead of developing software, they're playing with yellow stickers. Stickies, everything yellow, lots of stickies. And to be a Scrum Master, you have to pass some religious certification to get a certificate or something like this by just special kind of monks is able to deliver the certification. It's very mysterious. And I would say the Scrum and XP and everything is very good for management to explain how the software development should work. But if you have passionate and motivated developers, they just do their work. They are iterative because you cannot develop software in other way than iteratively. And you can name Scrum, Kanban, or XP or whatever, but it's always the same. The shorter iterations, the shorter the feedback, the better, and test a lot. This is actually the whole, the whole thing behind. And I would say if someone invents a name already, it's game over. Because if you name it Scrum, everyone, oh, we have Scrum, it will work right now. No, you still would like to develop software. We would like to develop good software, not to be Scrum compatible or whatever. Okay, so there's a larger story, so we can do it in Lolek. But for now, small team, motivated team, it's also an experiment. If you know someone who delivered great software, something unique, ask him which process he followed, she or he followed. Right? So when you get back, nothing. Right? I tested a lot, and this was actually the story. So make some interviews with Google developers, iOS developers, which build small teams, which build something great. The larger the team, the more process we know. We already express our opinions about very large teams. Of course, if you have 200 developers, they have to do something. So they have to plan, then stand up and sit down, and whatever, right? But if you have a small team, then it just works. I'm just speaking about Germany. I don't know idea.
Questions? Can we have questions?
Yeah, of course.
So if you care so much about the don't repeat yourself rule, why do you repeat 6 lines of unnecessary comments in every file?
Yeah, someone told me this the last time, and I'm just too lazy to remove this. And if you look at this is the development daily build of NetBeans. and I test a lot, so I download a lot, and some of the things get lost. So I'm just too lazy now to. I have some scripts, but not everything is taken. And but exactly the same question I got in a workshop last week or something. Why I'm writing, this one, right?
This empty comment is just beautiful.
Yeah, I know but if you don't do this, then NetBeans will generate something like to set the comment, go there, and so I will remove it completely. But this is, you're right. Oh, Javadoc, because you mentioned Javadoc, is forbidden unless you have something to say. So what I really do in my code reviews, if you attempt to comment on getters and setters or default constructors, this is a defect, because it's impossible to comment them. What you can say? This is a getter, this is a setter, and this leads to the whole craziness that the numbers mean more than quality. Because there is, of course, some measure tool which measures, everything has to be commented, and what you do as a pragmatic developer, you generate all the crap, right? So, but small team, or if you do something in your leisure time, right? You would never say this is a setter, this is a getter, this is a class, and this is an interface, because you know what it is, right? So, by the way, this is a very good comment. And this was my fault, and if I create another class, we get the same issue again, right? So, registration resource. Registrations, this is plural, and the path is registrations. And what we can get is string registrations. Get return Duke, Java, so of course, and so on. I think SOA is completely dead, right? So we had in Germany a conference, SOA conference. It was renamed to something else, and then at the end there was more speakers than attendees. Resources, registrations, or resource. Resource, right? Resource, application path, application. Looks actually good. Path, registration scan. Should work. Remember. Resource, registrations, and you get Duke, Java, so SOA. It was the simplest possible REST web service without any XML. So web XML is optional. This is what we learned so far in Java 7. Questions about this?
Can you increase the font, please?
And the comments. You don't see it from the back? You see it's only bacteria from the vocab.
I'm a bit curious because you are very well prepared for the answer, I think, but SOA is that, can you tell a little more, because this is too huge, the contract, or
Okay.
Or for example, if you would like to know the type, with what parameter you would like to call, or pass, what type of parameters I can pass, and which type are they? I have this in the documentation, or I have a contract for REST, or...
Very good question. This is 24, it's already crazy. You have very good resolution, is the problem. I had 20 font already. So, the problem, I was asked by Stefan Tilkov, who is very into REST, to write a chapter to a book, SOA something. And I wrote the chapter in my way, a SOA, and the result was I got some questions to be an architect in a SOA project. And the problem was, most of my contracts were cancelled after 2 days, and Yeah, I was. In some contracts, I just quit from my side the contract. And the problem was with all the SOA projects, the problems were not the technology. The problem of SOA was the governance. And if I asked the questions, the project died. And this was the problem. And which question I asked? So this was actually what you asked as well. Was, if you have multiple departments, so this is off topic. If you're interested in this, why it died? Yeah. Okay. So there were departments, and usually department did something on their own, right? And now comes SOA. So what is the idea? That what they did is published somewhere and is reused by other departments. That was at least my understanding of the whole discipline. The problem is, now if they do this, they could never ever change the contract. Because if they deliver it once, now they have to copy all the stuff. Because if we change something, they will break all the other lines. Right?
But you can do certain versions.
Yeah, version is a copy.
You change about the
version is a copy.
But other version and there are differences.
The next question was, how many versions would you like to have? Three.
No more.
I got either 2, 3, or 7.
3.
This was the answer from the department. Now the question is, let's imagine a very important project in your company is dependent on the first version.
No.
You are introducing the 4th one. Do you have the power to cause the mighty project to move? I never saw this. Because if the life cycle are different, the budget is different and so forth. So this was the first somehow breaking point. Okay, how to do this? The next problem was in SOA, if you do something, I would like to consume your interface, right? So oh, it's nice, but I would like to have some different parameters. One parameter more, one parameter less. Now my basic question is, who pays that? What is the budget? Is it in your department, in my department? Who has the money? No one had the money. This was oh yeah, you're right? So someone, and the other department has a release cycle. I have a release cycle. If I put a new requirement to the other department, it takes more time to implement their stuff and my stuff. It was an unsolved problem. So the solution would be to have a very pragmatic SOA department with a huge budget, searching for such things and externalize the things what I never saw in practice. Right? Should we go further with SOA? Okay. Then, technical problems. The technical problems in SOA or different versions of SOA. Right? You have different versions in deployment. You have 1, 2, and 3. My question is how the version looks like in your SCM. And most of the companies at that time had either CVS or Subversion. So is it a branch? Then have merging, with Subversion. It's like, oh no, it's way too complicated. We have just trunk. It's like, okay, then what do you do then? You patch something, yeah? Then you would need per version a Jenkins build, fully automated, right? Of course. No one had this. There was no budget. No one thought about this. What I started was ESBs, fancy stuff, but these are the basics. Start with that. And then, of course, they didn't like what I said, right? But I think this is the foundation of everything. And the next problem is a very small problem, is in SOA, no one thinks in SOA like. So all the use cases were designed in request-response way. Request-response. Order succeeded. Do something, succeeded. This is what usually you get from the business department, right? Use cases. Or user stories, but they are synchronous. In SOA, you cannot do this way. In SOA, if you have an orchestrator, if you attempt from an ESB orchestrator for set or whatever to coordinate 5 services in two-phase commit fashion, forget it completely. Two-phase commit over, ASCII. What you will have to do, you will have to refactor all your interfaces in fire and forget fashion. This works well in SOA. It could work, but you have to change the business logic. And this killed all the projects. Because such use cases, and this is called compensating transactions. So the business compensating transactions were never specified. This was my short rant about SOA. So usually I spend more time, but this was just the bullet point. So I would like to stick with Java right now. But to your point about the contract, the main difference between SOAP and REST is object-oriented, SOAP is procedural. So SOAP addresses static methods actually. This is the whole point of SOAP. REST addresses resources or objects. This is the different point of view. And SOAP has WSDL. What service description language? REST could have WADL, but usually in practice nothing, because WADL is invention from some microsystems. It only works on Glassfish and not JBoss and not Tommy, so forget WADL. So SOAP with WSDL is cover my S strategy. So the less you like the other department, the more you are interested in sign-offs and WSDLs. But if you look in the practice of a WSDL, I never saw a good one. Look at the WSDL, they look like crap. So everything I saw in Germany.
It's the same in Poland. It's the same in Poland.
I would say, really, I never would like to offend you. This is what I like, Jack, here, because again, this is just my experience, not in Poland. No project brought except for Kita, which is great. Right? And the WSDL is like crazy. They try to reuse something, and they look at the method, and no, one method was flush SOA buffer. Which department would like to flush your buffer? They're crazy. What are we doing here, right? So, and REST, here, what we did, resource registrations. If we know LODEC and registration, every one of you will know what I intend to design here. With WSDL, forget it. You cannot use WSDL without documenting it, but you can absolutely use REST web services without documentation.
But if you would like to have some version in REST, there is one additional parameter, but I don't want, for example, to run in this REST, but in other with version.
Yeah.
So you
have
the same.
You have two choices. Now your question is getting better. So you can put the version here. You have parallel wars, exceptors, and so on.
It's different. You have some versions. How many versions you can have in REST?
But I don't do this. But you can do this.
Okay, you can.
But what we have to do is the following. The RESTful interface, we don't even attempt to be type safe, but we have to test a lot. So we deploy the latest version to Jenkins, and all known clients, versions of the clients, tested metrics built on Jenkins go against the RESTful interface. This is the only survival strategy you have.
So if you add in your object class, you add one or more attribute, it's no problem.
No, you cannot remove anything. You cannot remove attributes.
Or you add one more parameter, this is totally different URL then, yes?
No. No parameter. Parameter is not in the URI.
Okay, so
parameter is in the body.
So you would like to make a reservation and you have one more attribute in the reservation?
We don't version.
Okay.
In small project we version, in larger project we don't version. And we means I. It could be strange practice, but it works in my case.
And you don't have a problem with two-phase commit anymore?
No, because you don't even attempt to do this. Like if you look, for instance, at Amazon, if you open the Amazon.com site, it is not like two-phase commit on all internet providers in the world. There is no AdSense and whatever. It just works. And why it works? Parts of the providers are not there, they are not there. You have to live with the failure in internet. You cannot remember. Two-phase commit in SOA, what you can do, if I know that you are using two-phase commit in your ISP, I will create a small hello world service and block 5 minutes. And wait until everything rolls back. You can hack with one little service everything. Two-phase commit does not work in SOA. And two-phase commit that actually never works properly because if you're really into two-phase commit, you have to look at XA exception. It is the foundation, what can go wrong with two-phase commit. For you, I make it a little larger. So this is not a part of Java. This is part of the two-phase commit protocol. And the developers will have to catch these exceptions. I never thought it in the practice, so they are just ignored such errors. And what I like the most is heuristic mix. So transaction branch has been heuristically committed and rolled back. If you don't have right catch in your code, if you're not catching this problem, your code becomes inconsistent. The state becomes inconsistent. Heuristic hazard. The transaction branch may have been heuristically completed. So the ESB or someone, the coordinator thinks, oh, probably it happened, right? And you will have to deal with the errors. I never saw it in production. So what I really did in SOA, We did, for instance, I forgot all the servers. Just go to the database, 2 JDBC drivers, and see what happens, and it didn't work. Two-phase commit is, the problem is you cannot do nothing about this, and there's always problems in production with two-phase commit. So I would say, don't use two-phase commit. So this is actually this was my best practice. So then the question is, we had AS400 and ZOS and everything was two-phase commit, and now it doesn't work. The difference between then and now is, back then there was a system administrator who looked at that letter queues and saw such errors. The errors were manually recovered. There was a person caring about this. And now what the developers do, try throwable, try get throwable, no, everything to dev null, problem solved. I had task forces because of this, and it was absolutely untested. Okay, my point is just as unserious, to use more and more abstractions and don't care about the basics. And you could use actually JAX or REST or RESTful two-phase commit way, but it works differently. Are you interested how it would look like in JAX or REST way? Or yeah? So this is, I show it all the time. So if you saw it already, then do something else, right? So can I hello cloud? This is actually the SAM Cloud API, which is no more in action because Oracle bought SAM and they killed that. But the documentation is still online. So if you're interested in this, just download this and look at this. And what I do, this is you can manage the whole data center with REST web services. And the point is, if you just look at the protocol, you will know what happens. What I had to do is, I had to manage EC2, Amazon, over SOAP. I had that visible, I generated the interfaces, and yeah, what I should invoke, right? It was like 500 interfaces, and no one knew in which order which has to be invoked. So I had the visible, I had the interfaces, I still doing the documentation to actually invoke this. Okay? So, now the experiment, and you have to criticize me. So find something that you don't like, right? So get cloud SAMCOM. So what it means, get the cloud, right? So you get back the cloud, implementation version 5997, whatever it means. And this is JSON, by the way. It could be XML, whatever you like. Virtual data center with VDC, R&D Sandbox, two URIs. So what you will do as curious developer, just write out, right? Get VDC, what happens? So and now you get the whole cloud back. Get VDC, you get IP addresses, clusters, controllers, virtual networks, virtual machines. The point is, if you are a system administrator and you look at the API, you will absolutely know what happens here. There's no excuse. But if you don't know what VM is, you cannot use the API. This is the point. Okay? So, now, virtual machine templates. So I would like to do something actually. So firewall, dual core, and so forth. And then I say adding server. Now it becomes interesting. Post VDC, I would like to create a database right now. So what we can do, block forever until it's created. It could take 1 hour, to provision the database, install everything from internet or whatever. And the interesting part is you get back 202 accepted. Part of REST. Not okay, accepted. I got you. But I have no idea whether it will actually happen. So if you would like to check the status, use this URI. So what happens here, the user becomes a transaction coordinator. This is a common pattern. The same pattern you will see at Amazon. At the beginning of internet, I bought lots of Java books at Amazon. I click the button, you have the book. This is actually the answer. Now you click the button Amazon, you get an email back, you click the button. It's like, okay, I know this, right? And then you get the next email is, your book is not available. Would you like to still have the book? So what it means right now, the Amazon, you are becoming the transaction coordinator, and they sell it as best practice. This is the common approach of today's software. You cannot be two-phase commit with 3 providers and doesn't work in the practice. It could work with quantum computing again, but not with current hardware. So accept it, and then at one point we say, okay, this is the URI. If we fetch the URI, we get back the database server, and we can attach something do something further. So a good RESTful web interface or RESTful API is like a good website, but for machines. This is how I look at RESTful web services. And what Java EE developers do, they misuse REST for remote procedure code, which is crap. Then I would rather use SOAP than this. So it means in one project, I started with post, and developer asked me when post was introduced. What do you mean by introduced? Is that new in Java 5? These are all the projects. What? And then I always use get, and it always worked. And I tried to explain to him that post or put even, right, or sometimes delete is very important. It was hard to explain them. And then in the same project, the company bought Google Appliance. So Google Appliance is a search engine which crawls the whole internet, intranet, not internet, intranet. And they tried things out, all the gets, all the links. And what they did, they deleted with get. So the half of the portal just disappeared. And then they believed that get should be idempotent, right? And post is something else. So, now the fancy story. Get is idempotent. Post is the only thing which is not idempotent. And if you look at RESTful web services, they are better defined than SOAP. In SOAP is actually just a post on one URI called action and game over. This is post. It's actually misuse of the HTTP protocol. REST is get, give me something without side effects. Post, create something, but I don't have the ID. And put is the same, but I have the ID. I always confuse post and put, but I never confuse it again because I think about a hash map. This put in REST is very similar to push. This is actually what I think of is the put in the map, right? Delete is delete something, which doesn't mean delete. What you should say right now, yeah, but it's just cropped, created out the delete, right? It's like, no, it's not true. If we go here, registration, you should find something which is not doable with REST. This is the challenge. So I will hack a little bit more and try to introduce something which is not doable with REST. Questions? Agreed, everyone? Are you satisfied? Are you going to do it for your business?
By the way, I like very much REST, and I somehow agree with you. And I wanted to know your opinion.
My problem is I don't find any arguments anymore for SOAP. 2 years ago, I could argue you get security for free, but it was hacked by German hackers, right? And if you are interested in how to hack XML encryption, and now it is secure, but if everyone can read it, then it's not that interesting. And with JAX-REST, you can still encrypt whatever you like. So there's actually not a problem.
Signatures and etc.
Just the XML encryption. I don't know what exactly. I have to admit, since Java 5, I never use SOAP in commercial projects. Sometimes I'm hired to help them with SOAP. If I explain what's the problem, they don't like it anymore. And even bigger companies, not like startups, but even some banks, we migrated to REST. Agreed? Who likes SOAP? Okay, then what I'm talking about, so you are on my side, right? So now we need registration. Registration and entity and why, I will cover that in a second. And pardon?
The comments.
Ah! I would delete the comments. I have to do this. I thought this is actually a whole access type field and registration. We have to provide name, and everything else comes from NSA anyway. So probably H, right? Oh, for the latest H. What? H is an int, right? Should be sufficient. Oh, even for Java developers. So we need a constructor and an ISA constructor. And now we can return the registration here. New registration. Duke and H is of course 42. And so as you can see, we have XML. And by the way, what you could do, because it's JAX-B class, you can create XML schema on the fly if you like. We can, for instance, register options and generate, if you like, service key on the fly. But the nicest, even nicer, if I go here, I can say -h accept application/JSON. And you get JSON. So this is what you get for free in Java 6 and Java 7. It's got content negotiation. And why I got in browser XML is because the browser prefers XML over JSON. And if you think about this, no one is interested anymore in SOAP. Why? This whole Internet of Things, you know, Androids, iOS, AngularJS, no one would like to have the SOAP stuff, XML stuff. And JSON is actually more reasonable right now. And this is the reason why I usually, what I do in Java 7 projects, I work with the JSON API instead of this. Because this is type safe, not so flexible, but then I just commit to JSON, nothing else. Okay? Questions? No questions? Then I will skip to JSON.
In SOAP, you using WSDL, you can generate the client just on the fly with single command line. This kind of advantage that I guess can be accounted for on the SOAP side of things. Do we have anything comparable?
I never use it. Generate REST.
Right. Okay.
I will never use it. The reason is the code looks like crap. And in Java 7, there's a really nice JUG's REST API which was introduced. Really good one. Would you like to see this? Is it new for you? API aggregate. This is actually very nice API where you can call directly the client. And we always use this instead of generation, and developer like that. So the approach is a little bit different. But this is, you need one line per invocation. So it's not an issue. And the serialization, deserialization just works out of the box. I had some problems with SOAP. In one project I had to use it. And the developers somehow, I don't know what happened, but the namespace was wrong for some attributes. You know what happened in SOAP? What happens? Who uses SOAP? Who has to use SOAP? What happens if someone, for unknown reason, the namespace doesn't match? It doesn't work, yes, but what happens? What do you expect?
The application might not start. The application might
I
not
would
start.
expect exception, because SOAP is said to be, somehow type safe. What happens is, you get null. Null. So perfectly fine, you get null. So some attributes will null and the others no. So my test looks nice. Always null. So then if you look at my blog, you will see I try to track it down. There was TCP on the TCP IP level. And then I fire up SOAP UI, and with divs I found the problem. But I would never expect such behavior in SOAP. Okay. Generate REST client, and it could use existing resource, but not, there is a bundle, but forget it, it's not a standard. There is some web application. Okay,
I believe that the question was for the customer or client who connects to the endpoint can also generate for the staff, classes.
Yes.
Not if I have an application I can generate, but if I'm somewhere else in the world and I connect, I can having the endpoint just was import or as for say util, it depends on the platform. You can generate the stuff. And what about the rest? If somewhere in the internet is the application REST endpoint, can I do something like this? This was the question.
And the problem is we only have the bundle, which is not standard. If we have the web application description language, we could generate everything. But I would say, okay, this is unfair because it's just supported by Glassfish and there's actually no solution.
So you have to solve it.
Okay, so, but if you look pragmatically on this, PayPal, GitHub, they all have REST API. And it was never a problem to build a client. So there is a different approach. You call something and you get a huge object back, right? Or huge business object back. So it's not like you need to know 500 methods to achieve something. The approach is a little bit different. If you look at the cloud platform here, it was actually how long would it take to implement a Java API for this?
So I understand that you have to have some documentation, good documentation to know how to connect them.
Yes. Yeah,
And in
there is a nice
contract,
tool for this.
you
And
have
the tool
possibility to check.
enunciate. Enunciate. This is a great tool. And one tool is what I just enunciate creates a really nice used in like this. So we're using project and it just worked. This is what I mentioned before. For REST, you have to be passionate, you would like to code, there is no problem. And you are 9 to 5 developer and say, oh no, I need a contract, then it won't work. So, you know, so political driven development doesn't work with REST. But the whole internet is REST. Okay? Enunciate. There's another tool which I forgot. There's enunciate, which also generates nice stuff. Okay. Should I hack the client or stay on the server? Who is for the client? Server. There was this client.target.get, something like this, except get. This is actually 3 methods that you have to call. And I always use the client for my system tests from outside, from the server. So, on the server, what I would like to do instead, I use JSON object in Java 7. And this is new. And the API is actually great. It would be named and dot at age 42. So completely unsafe. Build. Return. And now we just have JSON, of course. And the same. Say something new and something new. And why I use this a lot? Because it's not typeset but very flexible. What I did recently, last year, a project with Google Maps, for instance. So at first, my Java thinking was everything's typeset, right? I did a large large tree of objects, but actually the longitude and latitude was the most crucial thing for the JavaScript client. Everything else no one can. So instead of being typeset, it's okay, as long as I deliver longitude and latitude, my JavaScript client just works. And this worked perfect. Now it's in production, and I was a lot faster with the not typeset approach in this particular project than with the Java delivery. Because on the other side, you have Angular, something like Angular. You just issue one call and you have the JavaScript object in memory. So there is, if you have JavaScript with typing, game over. There is no types anymore. And JavaScript is a little bit more popular than Java. Okay, questions about this? There is JSON object, JSON array.
I have one question.
Very good.
When you have quite big response, you want
What
to
I
stream it, and you want to stream it to the client, how to do it with JSON and this JSON object?
It's impossible with JSON object. You get, I think this is streaming result for streaming.
Yes, there is, but I was
Streaming
curious
output.
about JSON.
And what I will do right now, because I have to back up something. I have a huge Hazelcast cluster, and I would like to stream the JSON actually. And there is a JSON reader and JSON writer for streaming, so you can stream, and I will have to couple this with streaming output, but I have to do it. So I'm not ready. But this is my thinking, because I cannot just deserialize everything to JSON object because it will my memory would explode. So I will stream it to streaming output. And with JAX-OS, we have a direct way to do this. And what you can always do, message body reader or message body writer. If you implement this, you can map this to any MIME type line. And then you get the output stream back, an input stream, and you can do whatever you like. Message body, should I implement this? Would you like to see a custom serializer in JAX-OS? This would answer the question. No. Okay, no. Then message body reader, message body writer. Implement this and think about producers and MIME type. This solves your problem. Then you can string whatever you like inside. Okay, other questions? Now, the question is, why boundary entity registration? The first craziness what I see in projects in Germany and Austria and Switzerland is the code is not structured after business responsibilities. What I don't get. Instead of exposing registration, the fact that something will like register, what they do is they introduce a package exceptions. And all exceptions are in exception package. There is another package beans or beanstalk. And the package interfaces or interfaces. And sometimes even they structure everything in client and server. Everything which is client and client and server and server. And I always ask the question, if something is reusable, you share the class or put something, or what do you do then, right? So my point is, my observation is, it is far better to think about the business and structure the code as a business responsibility. Technology changes, and if you have the next requirement, feature request, it will probably sound like enhance the registration. So what I do, I would search for registration package as my component, open the package, and hopefully it's cohesive. Everything which is in the package has something to do with registration. But if you structure your code after beans, interfaces, and exceptions, it is very unlikely that we find them. And if I ask why you're doing this, carbon card, architect told us, right? Questions about this? This was the first. Components are like big objects, and the name is good if you find a direct relation to a business department. If someone in the business department, right, knows what registration is, then it's a good name for a component. And at the beginning of the project, everyone starts with concepts, like orders, customer, something, a business concept. And my observation is just, from these concepts, this concept leads to components. Because if you look at Amazon, I don't think that the whole order process is handled by a class. Probably it's a component, something larger than a class. Questions about this? So, now, boundary, what is lacking is the control package here. The question is, why strange naming, boundary entity control? And the answer is because there is no other standard. And there is another problem, Parkinson law. It's called Parkinson law of triviality. Parkinson law of triviality. Parkinson's law of triviality. Right? Yes. And Parkinson's law of triviality says the more trivial a decision is, the more expensive it becomes. And in my recent project, end of last year, I introduced a maven archetype to generate a sample application to the client because I believe it's better than write documentation. Sample application is better. And the client didn't argue with me about the contents of the sample application. But they argue about 2 days about name of the group ID, maven group ID. And it was not sufficient to say just take your name. No, is it good or not? And there were different departments that have to argue on the group ID because it has to be stored in Nexus. Whatever I said, it has to be approved. So I was like, I was crazy. No, 2 days, 20 emails just about the group ID. No one looked at the code. I wrote really strange things from their perspective, I would say. Everything was fine. But the group ID has to be argued. So, the naming. Boundary control entity is one of the oldest patents on the internet, I think. It was by, I think, really Butch or Rambo. This was the three amigos who created UML. And there is one patent called entity control boundary or boundary control entity, BC or ECB. And it fits very well to Java. The idea is the following. Every business component is structured in the same way. Boundary is the hard boundary to the outside world. And it usually contains RESTful web service. It could be so, it's a facade, period. It contains everything that's needed to communicate with the outside world. control is optional. An entity are domain objects which can be persistent, like JP. This is the idea. So why I took the patent? Because now I don't have to argue anymore. So the book before, the Greek book, I described my own idea with service, facade. I liked the names better, but it was a disaster. In all projects I have to argue now, why facade and not service facade? And why not service, but I don't know, there were strange names, endpoints and whatever. To say, okay, then take a standard, and now the reason why I'm using this is in the book. It's the oldest book of the internet. If you don't like the book, just show me another standard, but don't argue anymore about names. So, why I'm doing this? To save time and meetings. Long meetings should be forbidden. So, this is waste of time. So, after half an hour, you cannot say anything. You can say, okay, then instead of meeting, just proof of concepts. So, question about this? So, what do we need? We need the meet. And this is registration service. And now something unpopular, comment, right? so always this. Okay, wow, why you are using the heavyweight, EGP is very complex. Okay, if you remember stateless, then you are done, right? But again, always the question why I use stateless EGPs. And German conferences, really German conference, there's some like there's a trend to do everything with CDI. So okay, I could do this. So instead of stateless, I could say something like request scope, and of course threaded and monitorable and secure and stateless, because it has to be, and stateless something else because stateless is already AJB, so light state or whatever, light state. And what else do we have? A pool level, of course, with max pool size, max equals 50. And the point is, what stateless means is like CDI with aspects. This is stateless. And if you have a Java 6 application server or Java 7 application server in place, not using EJBs and reinventing the EJBs is extremely kind of hard. It's like, I cannot believe what I'm talking about, right? And the next thing is, they tell me EJBs are too slow. And my question is, did you ever measure the difference? The answer is no, but I know it. So I measured several times, no difference. It's like, if you find a difference, it's like 1 millisecond or something. This is really no difference. Okay? And they say, okay. But you're not right. Back then, at J2E time, EJBs were too slow. And this is completely wrong. If you would measure the performance of a J2E server, the old J2E before JDK 1.3, the performance of application server running was before JDK 1.3 and after JDK 1.3, after JDK 1.3 is going to be slower. Why? Because before JDK 1.3, the application server didn't have dynamic proxies. They were introduced with JDK 1.3. So at deployment time, the whole code was generated. And generated code is fast. Deployment was slow, generated code is fast. After JDK 1.3, all fancy application servers use dynamic proxies. And at that time, the slowest possible code was dynamic proxy. So actually, the modern application servers used reflection a lot. The old application servers didn't have reflection. There was nothing to reflect because dynamic proxy was not there, right? So the code was faster than now. And it was actually never too slow. I cannot remember any case where EJBs caused some problems. What always caused problems, transaction handling, two-phase commit, whatever, but it was not, the problem of EJB. Whether you start a transaction with user transaction or EJB or whatever, it's always the same problem. Okay? Of course, if you are using telcos and you have a millisecond latency, then EJB is probably the right thing. But I usually don't have such requirements. Then you shouldn't use SOAP at all, right? Because then this is game over. If you just look at the visible, everything will break. So, status. The simplest possible thing you can get. Oh, what I forgot, of course, transaction. The most important thing. So, what EJBs are is like opinionated server-side code. Very unpopular opinion. Yeah, but this is my opinion. And yeah, introduced EJBs in project, no one complained actually, no one. But I hear it now a little bit less, but it's way too complicated. It was complicated in 2003, 11 years ago, way before Rails. Rails was acting in 2006, so who cares about 2003? This is a museum technology. So, public void register. String, yeah, the same. And of course, registered. When it ends the virtual, you notice?
That's 8 p.m.
8. So everyone goes out. Plus 2. So now we can inject the EJB to the resource using inject, and no, not here. And for registrations, I would use post. This is post. RS register object get string name. Absolutely and type safe, but it works. Questions about this?
Can you put here stateless? For example, in the registration resource and make it stateless to have, I don't know, pool of the objects.
Not pool, I do it actually. I do it all the time because I get monitored. This is what I do actually. I get monitored.
And what is the difference? Because you have like a servlet without this, and now you have like a pool of objects, and it is faster, better.
Yeah. Why EJBs are important at all? What is the deal with pooling? This is actually the question. What is the deal of pooling? Is it faster, better? And the answer is the hope was back then that the pool saves some problem with new and the garbage collection. The reason is with modern JVMs, that's actually pointless because pooling is even worse for the performance than no pooling at all, actually. Because if you pool something, it survives the garbage collector cycle and then everything becomes slow itself. But the pooling is great because what we have is max pool size. So what I always do at boundary level, I measure the performance which the application server can stand, right? And then subtract, I don't know, 10%. And this is my pool size. So if I set the pool size to 5, there will be never more than 5 parallel requests. And this is the easiest possible thing to restrict parallelity, to set a thread. This is why I use pooling. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you can hack the application server. You can start JMeter and start as many threads as you like, and it will just open new objects, and then it will break. Not new objects, new threads, sorry. You open new threads, start new threads, and each thread consumes some memory, and you get out of memory on Linux even without seeing it in the visual game. It's not because of performance. So first is because of robustness. This is the first one. And if you have lots of reflection, if you think about this, if you would use everywhere request code, what the request code means, for each request, the object is created and rejected. This means request code. If you think about this, you have whole tree of objects. It will inject all the objects per request. And what happens behind the scenes? Reflection. So it will use reflection to inject the stuff. If you pull the tree, it will just inject once. So if you have full, and a deep tree of injected objects, the performance of stateless EJBs is comparable with singletons. So the next question would be, why not singleton? And my answer is because what I saw in projects, singleton was synchronized. Happens a lot. Some developers put synchronize on the methods and everything blew up. Okay? And there is, I forgot actually, someone from Red Hat back then makes a scalability study between singletons and stateless EJBs because of scalability, and because of the queuing and pooling, stateless scale better, but this was never an issue in my project. A good question. So, questions about this? So, it would work on Java 7, but it will not work on Java 6. Who know why? So, I think it could even not work on, I will have to, I think, to complete the video about this. Let's see. Oh, it works. So, It works on I have to check the post. Firefox. There's a nice plugin called Poster, and I would use the URL and content type is application JSON, and this was name, was Duke. No content, register Duke. This was okay. So the poster is just like a generic line. You can use SOAP UI as well, but until it starts, we are in Dole, right? So what we see right now that the EGP was injected. So best practices: don't put any business code to the JAX-OS resource, never. Because it never looks like this. Usually you will have to deal with headers, response codes, and you will have to mock out a lot of things. So in my case, the whole code resides in the facade, and the JAX-OS resource is just a decorator which cares about HTTP, but there is no implementation. Agreed? So now, what I don't have is the let's say the name validator, or NSA, for instance, right? Someone who validates the names. So registration.control, and this would be the name validator, and it checks the name and check whether the name is okay to attend to whatever. And of course, only Duke is able to attend. Return equals. So if I would inject, so this is in control. What control means? Something which developer just introduced because of divide and conquer. Just would like to partition the code. And what I do in projects, this is optional, very optional. Because if you don't do this, you will end up with empty layers. So what it means is the developers will introduce controls and inject the control to the facade, and the facade is going to be empty. Because in usual CRUD interface, there is nothing to do. So controls are optional. Now the question is, what happens if you have developers who don't care about code quality, and you end up, with bot facades with 2,000 methods, and the rescue is Sonar. Sonar from the company SonarCube, Sonar source runs Jenkins. And there is one, either Sonar, if you don't have Sonar, there's another tool very similar, is called Grep4j. And Grep4j, what both tools are doing, they are using the cyclomatic complexity and test coverage and putting them in relation. And I have to admit, my code is usually poorly covered with tests because we only test things with cyclomatic complexity higher than 3 or 4. And what I prohibit in my projects to test get setters in like Java, because I never saw that get setter could fail. This is impossible. So what happens then? Of course, if you have a project with DTOs, which are forbidden in my project as well, because there is no point of having DTO usually, or no. What is forbidden, DTOs, or what is forbidden is projects with dozer, which works well. Because then, what it means is, that you have parallel object hierarchies, and dozer just copies the properties back and forth, and this is the application even worse than my comment case, right? So, DTOs and dozers, if dozer works well, you have an architectural problem. So, back to Grep4j or Sonar source. In Sonar, there is one link called clouds. And in the cloud link, you get a dashboard-like, a huge, you get an interface that looks like Sonar Cube. And yeah. So the first things are not that interesting. classical and clouds. Top risks. And I will take this one. We could take, but imagine it would look like there were lots of classes here. It looks like this. And what it means is, large font is big complexity. Red color means no tests. Blue color means tested. What in my project is forbidden is the following: large font, large red font. Blue small font means crazy developers. They expect getters and setters to break. Okay? So this is not exactly true because you can test the small classes over the larger one, but you know what I mean. This is exactly the same rule like in Java. So what it would mean here, if you have Scrum or something similar, in each, there's definition of done. This is my main fight with Scrum Masters. So I always try to extend the definition of done to saying, if we have large font, which is red, this is not done. And the response from Scrum Master is always the team knows what to do. It's like we have some magic in the air, right? Probably not. Especially not if there are two developers from this company, one developer is a student, and two others from different company. And they are fighting with each other, right? And no one will care about quality. It's no quality. Okay, so what it means, large font is forbidden. So you will have to refactor the class activation spec factory. Or not refactor, sorry, you will have to write tests for the class. What will turn out if the code is crazy complex, it's hard to test. So what you will probably do, you will introduce new methods, you know, to bring the complexity down, and you will end up with object with 500 methods. As you probably know, it's not good design. It won't fit to one screen, so then you will introduce control. So the main difference in Java 6 and Java 7 is we are working in bottom-up, not top-down. It's not like at the first day you know all the patterns and all the layers. We just continuously improving the code. This is how it should work, right? So, and Sonar source have to run on each commit, which never happens. It runs at the beginning of each commit, then it runs once a day, then once a week, and then no one cares. Okay? And if you would like to save money, you have to dedicate one person to doing nothing else than increasing the performance from Sonar source and of course Jenkins, and play with master slave and all the load balancing issues. Questions about this? So this was a little explanation how to get control. So if you have facade, it gets too big, it becomes red, untested probably, untested and very complex. So what you can do is a cyclomatic complexity 26. So it's like you have 26 if else. 26 times without any test. But this one has accidental complexity of 1.7. So there is probably, you know, in toString or equals is probably more complex, and all the getters and setters, this was well tested. Coverage 60%. Okay? So, and if I see, I have something quite like code coverage 80%. So I always ask the quality department, would you like the coverage or good software, right? So now you get to choose. Because what happens sometimes is migration are very dangerous. If you migrate something from J2E 1.4 to Java 6 or 7, you can delete 80% of the code. And what remains is the bugs, of course, right? So all the DTOs, all the interactions are gone. And in all my metrics, they look like crap then, because they have, in Germany there was one project who had number of bugs per 1,000 lines of code. And of course, we remove everything, and there was like, you know, like, since you are here, everything goes away. So it looks like our chart looks like now. But, you know, I deleted everything just with tools. Or DTOs down and all the crap, we don't need it anymore. And there were, of course, no bugs because it was partially generated by the software. Okay? So, matrix or Sonar source. If you introduce Sonar source, tune the rules. Don't use Sonar source out of the box. It's crazy. Sonar source have to help you. So watch the dashboards and tune the rules. We do it always in my projects. And I see some teams which look at the dashboards and, oh, we have there major violations, so we have to fix that, and it's also carbon cut. Why you have to fix that? No one knows. Because someone downloaded Sonar source. Questions? Oh, you are the main question here.
It is time, a lot of time consuming when you have to prepare sonar, you know, make the rules. Do you have any?
Prepare sonar is 5 minutes. Download and stuff.
Yes, but you have to go through.
No. What you have to do? No. What you have to do is you just run sonar all the time and look at the critical major violations and tune them. Not at once all the rules. Just the rules they appear in the dashboard.
So each time you have the same source of the rules, or for each project the beginning, from the beginning?
No, from the beginning is impossible. We look at the rules and we know it's okay. There is a critical. Is it critical or not? And we degrade or upgrade this.
But there is no some.
The problem is the sonar is on the server side. Some things are not as critical as without server, for instance.
Okay.
And there is a general because if you for instance, everything has to be defined on parameters. On the server is stupid because everything lives for one request. If I'm building a swing client which is based on singletons, then final is totally different meaning. Sorry?
So you base your rules only on the checkers that have some keys. You set up your configuration, you run on the all set of rules, and depending on that you have the largest value that you keep, you select those that you receive later, or?
Yeah, what I do is this is what I only care about. And then you build in the code and you see some critical things.
So you don't select the root base of the problem that you might have in future?
No.
Okay, why not?
Because too hard, as he said, you will have to look at all the PMDs, all the rules.
And so why not that approach? To spend 1 day?
No, 1 day, it's impossible.
1 day?
You did it in 1 day. Okay, but I'm not able. So I was for a good example. But there are overlapping rules just to know to track which overlaps and put the rules in the same severity. You won't manage it in 1 day. You have to hire him. No, for me it was a sprays.
You must know about them because you have a before, so you cannot manage this. Because you pass to a developer that you need to understand. What's the problem with the
What I can say that in addition you can introduce some rules which are not on sonar always.
You can put on your own.
Yeah.
But based on the problem that you have, because
what do you mean problem you have? No, at the beginning you have no problems.
There's some risk that you must face, so that's a potential problem. So security, like something like that stuff.
Okay. If you have the requirement, there should be security manager not called in such way, then introduce the rule from the beginning.
Yeah, because.
But this is you are already in advanced quality stage, I would say.
Okay, so if we start with a new project, so it's very rare in the business market that we have new projects.
Oh, that depends, because we have a lot of J2E old projects, and now they are unmaintainable. And now if you migrate to Java 6, you are almost new because yes. So actually, and what I also happened to me a lot of time, lots of startups are beginning to use Java 6 and Java 7 because of productivity. So there's actually a lot of new projects really on the market. So yeah, and even the SOAP. If you have everything based on SOAP, if someone comes to you and would like, Android device would like to access your service, or iOS is impossible to solve. Just show a SOAP interface to an iOS developer. Yeah, exactly. Or some projects are based on Flash. It's the same story.
Yeah, but you can write something.
Yeah, but usually it is too late. There were no tests
on the projects.
Yeah.
Team with the money.
Yeah.
The money.
Money not. Yeah, at the beginning, if you are in an advanced stage and you have some problems, you have to tune the rules. But what I thought is, at the beginning of the project, you search all the rules and just adjust everything at the beginning. And this is the two of them. Impossible. Yeah, okay, then I'm glad, because if you say 1 day,
you must start from the 2 rules.
Yeah, of course. This is you're right. Yeah, I just completely misunderstood.
You can start from this day. We check this comment. From this comment, we update the rules.
So what I did is I got something like Excel, and this was rule is severity, should severity, and the reason. This is what I did several times.
Yeah, this is the common way, the Excel.
Yeah, for management. This is perfect for management because it says, okay, everything which is big and red is forbidden. And if they ask me what is the quality of projects, I look at this. This is the quality of the project, and this is very objective. Everything which is complex has to be tested.
Very fast. to adapt the state of the project.
Yeah. Okay. And then there are some trends. So just watch the trends and try to keep the complexity low. Okay. We have 20 minutes. So what I would also would like to say, to tell you, all the J2E patterns are set. The all J2E patterns, service locator, business delegate, everything together with completely. The only pattern which still has, we can go over the pattern, to prove the point if you like, but the only remaining pattern is application service, which makes sense, and this is actually the boundary. Everything else is gone. Would be interesting to go over the patterns very quickly. Should I kill everything? Or you believe me that everything is
Can you kill the service locator?
Yeah, it's already killed. We have dependency injection. With a resource, you can inject whatever you like.
I was thinking about the service locator in I think like you've got lots of components with lots of APIs, and you have to choose one. And when you to gather the knowledge about the components, where you keep it?
Qualify.
Qualify. You probably misunderstand right here.
I think so. If I inject the name
I was thinking about the big picture. You've got the few departments. Every department has its own component. We few APIs, REST APIs, and one component needs to communicate with another one.
Yes.
And where did you usually keep the knowledge about the URLs, APIs, and so on? Because probably just kind of
the classic service locator worked with JDI. What you are saying is you would like to have kind of registry, and it's not the service locator, it's the business delegate.
Right.
So what you would like to have is you have to encapsulate the JAX-RS client, right? Because you don't like to use all the time the client gets, so you would like to have a nice method to something, right? So you need the start of the JAX-RS interface. This is what you are saying, I hope. Because the old business delegate was interface factory implementation, and it used service locator to locate the home interface, and the home interface was asked for remote interfaces. We don't have it anymore. What we have is JAX-RS. But then the whole business delegate and service locate, they are condensed into one class, and you call the class as you like, and this class encapsulates the JAX-RS stuff. And how to get the class? I write unit tests first, or system tests, which encapsulate the JAX-RS client, and then I reuse the test, and this is the beginning of the class. Test first. You can set it as test first. There's one of the rare cases where test is first.
So, okay, so once again, the question is when you want to keep the knowledge about the service.
Yes.
So once you decide to write on a client or you just use get or post and then URL.
Yes.
Where you keep the knowledge about the service location, where you keep it in the third component, or every component knows about the other components and have those.
You mean the knowledge is the IP address, or what is your knowledge?
For example, you would like to register the client.
What
you have no idea which component can do it for you.
Why not?
You can, of course, yes, but what you end up in the situation where your components have to know about the location of the host or about the REST, and you would like to just use the service. I want to.
Let's say I have to be a little bit more code-driven, otherwise it won't work. So we have string host. Where to get the knowledge, right?
Yeah, how to find out the host.
Inject.
Okay, from where?
Then.
Inject it from where? Like
We have the logic. There would be completely different component called configuration. And we have a configurator, and the configurator produces the configuration with the injection point. I know from where it comes, and it produces. And now I know from where it comes. Remember, we have the current class. This is the class. And this is a common question. And I also know the name. Now I have a fully qualified name. Class.getName. Class. Name. And now I can go to JSON, database, JPA, and fetch the configuration at runtime.
Yes, I know how to inject the thing. I don't know where to keep it. Should I keep it in database? Should I keep it in another component?
Yes, I would keep it in database. Because
okay.
XML
What's happened when you have 5 databases?
Which one? Another direction. I mean, configuration should be in one database. If you have a configuration 5 databases, then you need another indirection. But this request is not that strange because we could have different configuration databases depending on the stage. So I would stage node, tests, integration, production. Then the stage is set somewhere, and depending on the stage qualifier, you get the right database.
So database.
Yeah, always database. I also prefer database over XML.
You would not hide the database behind kind of REST API to fetch the service?
No, I will use JPA. This is enough. You have JPA, you are independent of relation databases, independent of Eclipse, OpenJPA, and Hibernate. So more abstraction is crazy.
Straight away to database.
Keep it simple. If not, cargo part. If you don't know why, it's cargo part. It's per definition. It gets complicated, always gets more complicated. The hard stuff is to keep it simple all the time.
How we would like to model the database? What do you think about the domain here? Like, should be like we said the host, or it's more about the services and the?
No. You just mentioned the host and all that. So host, I could put your service in the service, I put the service. It really depends on the business requirements.
It's really?
Yes. You mean I would never start with this? Never. I will never start with configuration logging, nothing. If you look at my project, business projects, everything is conventional configuration hardwired. In Navigate, the first requirement, something changes, I will make it extensive. Never at the beginning. Why? This is an interesting question. Why? Because our IDEs are great. How long it takes to change something in whole projects, even though this is nothing. And what I see, millions of developers thinking about abstraction or abstraction, assuming changing something is hard. Writing the abstraction is hard. The challenges are usually very simple, if your code is simple. If you have built a framework already, you are lost.
How many projects do you support? How many projects do you support? Because you are freelancer, yes, so you go, you are hired by a company, and then you leave.
Yeah.
And the project remains.
Yeah.
So you said that this is not very hard to make a change in a project. I agree with that because this is our project, it's your project. But if you get a new developer, it's not so deep.
Yeah, I think the point is I try to write as simple code as possible. And then the new developers have a chance to understand this.
In that case, it is all perfect.
Never is perfect, but I would say with keeping it simple, we can survive longer. Until it blows up. This is the general observation.
Okay, but this is for apply to the new project from my point of view, because when you get a whole project, even from our country, not only from our country, so we have a lot of complicated stuff and cost entrance to the project to make some little change. It is a lot.
Yes.
It's sometimes even hard because I was hired from one night to make services and fix them to new market. Okay, this is done because it was done for a guy to make it very simple.
Okay, but what I can give you just example. Okay, so a project this was SOA project because of SOA, and they had some problem with memory and performance. And the project was it was several years in production already, and since it blew up, my contact was to help them, not to improve the architecture, just to find the problem. And the problem was, I found the problem, but the problem is to identify the problem. Yeah. I have to remove, 30 layers, which were meaningless. And I asked question, why is layer? And it turned out, 30 layers are superfluous. There's actually that they thought one time that it was, larger or reusable or whatever, and there's lots of crap without no functionality. So, and now they ask what to do. So, okay, we remove the whole framework. So we removed the homegrown framework, was the first problem. So they had their own cache, which was synchronized and didn't work as expected, so we removed the cache, replaced the cache with the cache. So how to remove SOAP? You cannot remove SOAP with REST right away. So what I did, I wrote a crappy REST interface, which was actually a remote procedure call-like, so it was not registrations, I modeled invocations. So I modeled the invocations, not the business logic, just to make a proof of concept, and we tested all the time. So we wrote the test afterwards, and I still got today email, something doesn't work, so I try to help them, but I usually don't spend time with usual projects. So if there's a task forces, firehorse, or starting from the beginning, so I spend some weeks with the developers, and go away. If they have questions, I come once a month and try to fix the problem. This is my usual operation. But if you have a huge project and no problems, you will never call me. This is actually, because it's a kind of works, no one cares. But if it blows up, then I say, okay, now we have to remove everything, which is partially true. But now we have opportunity to build it new or just make a refactoring, and developers like it actually.
If it works.
If it works, right? But really, I mean it. This is actually true. The challenge is not to know 50 patterns and introduce everything. The challenge is to keep it simple and stupid. It's a lot harder than you may think. If you just remove all the crap and just concentrate on the domain logic, it's really hard to find good names for the domains. At the J2E time, I could develop whatever I like. Customer, so I built customer entity, customer VO, customer data mapper, customer business delegate, service locator was generic, customer session facades, and I implemented probably one product and had 50 classes. In Java 6, you create a customer and you are done. Totally different world, right? And to your point, if you would like to be, I don't know, you have to find a use case. You don't, but if you, in one project, we had to, it was a television company, and they needed to plug in encoders and MPEG encoders and stuff like this. So, and what we did, we built a registry with webhooks. So it's called webhooks. So I plugin registered posting and URI, so we could call the plugin back. This is a kind of indirection, so a registry. But this was very specific requirement. They wanted to have a registry. It's not like I introduced the registry to be more maintainable. They have the obvious requirement for a registry, and we build that with REST and webhooks. This is a common technology with JAX REST. So the point is, I will never start with a framework. I reject to introduce configuration, what I show you right now. I never do it upfront, for instance. Because if you make something configurable and you store the whole configuration in the database, the question is, who will configure this in production? There is actually no stakeholder who dares to change something in production. It is really dependent operations. If you would like to store configuration somewhere, you will have to find a stakeholder, someone, an actor, who is interested in administering this stuff. Usually there is no one. Who cares?
Yeah. I think that this case might get quite more complicated when we start using it, because imagine that you have a quality assurance environment which has second configuration. Production configuration is done another one. You've got your local configuration for your local development, and like some components you've got on your local JBoss or other container, but some of them you would like to use from the quality assurance environment.
This is a great point. This is what I meant staging. What you have to do is, you have to use application services. So what it means is, let's be very concrete. So the problem is, JPA, you need the name of the unit, persistent unit. Okay? Yes. So the point is, all your application server have to expose the same name of the persistence unit. But internally, the application server has to be configured in a different way. So JDBC/registrations in your local development have to point to a Derby on integration to something else. This is the job of the application server. It was always the job. And it was even crazier. Back then, at J2E time, there were 2 levels in JDI to do this. I just forget it. There was Java comp env, one interaction we could map, no one used that. So just one level is sufficient. But this is the job of the application server. And in my case, what I do, we have a short chat, what I use right now is even crazier. I use Docker to provision JBoss and everything, and we have one container which looks exactly the same, and the only difference between different environments, the ports, is the Docker containers configured differently. But there's binary the same, and I'm very particular with that, because if you change if your application knows in which stage it is, you cannot be sure that it actually works in production. You have to have the same bits. So what I forbid absolutely are mocks or test code or any, there should be no change in all the stages. It's like a pipeline. You have one war, you should even sign the war and just move the war through the pipeline. This is the only thing it works. So sorry, absolute opposite opinion. But I think you have proper requirements which you cannot change. It looks like. So if you have such requirements, then you have it, right? What you can do. But if I had the power, I would just simplify this. And the greatest thing, what happened with Java 6 is the mix of dependency injection and conventional configuration. It is, all dependencies are reversed right now. So if there is something is obvious, you don't have to configure this. And I learned from this in all my projects. So configuration is exceptional. There's usually no configuration, except you would like to have something unusual. And in Java 7, it's getting even better. In Java 7, you can rely on a default data source, on a default JMS message, default thread pool. You don't have to configure anything, which is very good for product development. So I created some applications for end clients, and the great thing with Java 7 always worked. You put the war, whatever they have, it will start up, it will work in some kind. It will not perfect, but it will at least start. And if you think about this, this is very important for acceptance. Why Jenkins is so popular? Because you say Java minus jar Jenkins, and it's a startup, so you can use it. So not the same. But there was cruise control, people say Unorthodox. Right? It was XML over XML. So no one knew what they were actually conference talks, how to configure cruise control. But there is no conference talk how to configure Jenkins, how to use the plugins. But Jenkins, you just click OK, this is the configuration. Okay? So usability, a big thing. If you would like to be successful, it has to be usable. And who is your client are the developers. And when they don't like your solution because it's too complicated, you are lost. So whatever you will do, you will lose. So why I created this just for you? So I will just return fqn plus name, and this you can fetch from database. And the database, the name of the database will be the same, but the application server will be differently configured per stage. And with Docker, you would link the database from outside, so there will be no change on the application server. Minus link. Okay, this won't work. I will just explain you why. Because name validator is not annotated. So what you will have to do in Java 7 is to create a bins XML. And this is new. In Java 7, you can say all, annotated, or none. It means in Java 7, you can eject whatever is annotated. This name validator was not annotated. So if I change it to all classes are ejected. Okay? I think this is being installed maybe, just run the project. Let's see whether it works. No. I guess I will have to restart the message. I'm also using daily builds here, and there are some problems if I change the bins XML too much. Wi-Fi is well integrated as well. The problem is just right now the Wi-Fi plugin generates JBoss web all the time, and this is harder to find what it is. This is a minor bug, but very annoying. And Tommy is also very integrated in all the application servers. And Surprisingly good application server is WebSphere Liberty Profile, WLP. Not the big one, it's the smaller one. I just tested this, it's crazy good. So the point is, nowadays there are actually no more bloated application servers, except the big VIS and the WebLogic server, and everything else is very fast and very easy. So let's see. Questions? Very good question from you. I don't know whether we actually understood each other, but
I feel like we're not.
to content and you see here, registered you with host. So now it is a full qualified name. I could fetch it from database, and now the string could be dependent on stage, whatever you like, daytime, temperature, whatever. I do this very rarely. I just show it if someone asks me the questions. Because producers and qualifiers, I use it not a lot in usual enterprise projects. And what enterprise project is, something boring. You have to talk to database, to a host, and then fetch the data from database and display it somewhere.
And did you do, for example, a singleton and keep there like a cache?
Yes.
Some configuration?
Yes. If you would like to cache the data, then how to do this? First, what I forgot.
But in this particular situation.
Boundary. This is one minor thing to add. I would call the cache would be a control. And it looks like this. You could use a startup singleton. And startup singleton, the method preload. Doesn't matter the name of the method, but also the track could be load. You could preload data.
Yes.
But the most important thing is
the previous solution was better for keeping IP addresses for the cost segment?
No, because it is injected once and never again. If he would like to be highly dynamic, you could do this. And now you get the current value from database.
And what about synchronization?
Instance and provider.
Yeah.
Why is instance not provider? Why is it like another thing for the same pattern? You used instance, yes, but as I believe there is a pattern to use provider and then get. Oh yeah, this one?
No, this is not this one. This is a reservoir services. There is no Java provider. Java 8.
Java inject.
3 up.
3 up, yeah.
Oh yeah, this one.
Provider is more like producers. It's not like instance. So with instance, it's iterable. So the instance you get, you have to access to this. You could build something what you want. This was what I thought. Or you can inject a service and say, give me all services. If you are qualified, you can say, give me synchronous services, asynchronous services, and search for your services. So you can implement this. If you have something, if you would like to build a plugin registry or something like this, you can use the instance with qualifiers. Which was my original question, but you then started with multiple level databases, so then I show you the string injection.
At the end, the instance you can use as the set of the... It
is. Instance is the set of all the classes, and it's like actually the proxy of the actual injectee.
So to get is returning the first in the set?
Pardon?
The get method is returning the first?
And a little bit more complicated. So
matching is what?
Host dot is ambiguous and is unsatisfied. So if it's ambiguous and is not unsatisfied, then get will work. Otherwise, we'll get exception. So it's not like first. There should be unique conventional configuration. It should be only one, and then it works. Otherwise, what you can do is you can say, give me all strings, and this would work with. And you can do this always work. So, we would like to do something, and I think it's one of the chiefs, so we have to listen.
Actually, I was noticed by another one, so yeah.
Ah, okay, this is
he's paying
collective
both,
intelligence.
so, yeah.
Collective intelligence. Whatever I said, don't take it too personal or dogmatic, because everything is dogmatic doesn't work. But what I really believe is simplicity, and what I really hate is the escape to different languages. It's like in Germany there is no minute closure or whatever, because in Java is no more productive. Java is not no more productive because the productiveness of Java, because it's craziness of architects. Let's architects in Clojure implement 50 layers and 49 of them empty. They will be as productive as we are, but in Sublime and without any IDE support. So the point is, if you do Java in right way means pragmatic. If you think about what you are doing and just leaving everything which is suspicious, it is crazy productive. This is the point. And if you have larger projects, I mean, what I'm really curious is what happens with the old Ruby on Rails projects. Because I saw one. At the beginning of Ruby on Rails, no one tested. It was like, it's crazy. It looks like crap. There's even worse than Java. I mean, really interesting what happened with them, right? Or for instance, right now,
some derivatives still alive.
it will be really interesting what happens with the maintenance of the project. So it's not fault of Java. It is fault of not even of the architects. What I the problem with the architects is architects from now, Germany, tend to be developers from the year 99. And at that time, it was a best practice and a good thing to build such abstractions. Because back then, really, no one knew what happened, right? But right now, we are pretty sure what the requirements are, so we can get rid of all of these, indirections. And there is one interesting pattern called protected variations. Protected variations. And what the protected variations pattern says is, introduce abstraction only if something varies. If nothing varies, there is no abstraction. Also interesting point, I see lots of interfaces in projects. And I ask the question why, because of encapsulation and services and whatever. If you think about this, interface is the worst possible thing. If you would really like to have decoupling, use abstract classes. Because with abstract class, you can introduce default implementation, which is possible now with Java 8, but even in Java 6 and Java 7, but never happens. If you introduce an interface, whatever you're doing, you're breaking all clients and usually all implementation as well. Okay? And what I do, I always ask the question why. Why? If there is no answer, I know it's completed, okay, then you do something else, right? So, because if you can explain in very clear words why it is important to do this, it's not worth to pursue.
Can I have a question?
Of course.
Why? I can't see any test here.
Because unit test would be obvious.
What, really?
Yes.
For Java 8 test?
Yes.
Like, can you show us obvious test? It's so obvious.
I mean, this is a no, there is a no.
I don't know, I would like to check some part of the facade with the interaction with the controller.
This is not a unit test. If you're testing the interaction with the controllers and integration test.
Okay, let's do it.
It's okay.
Okay, it sucks.
Why?
And now I will not answer, and then you can ignore it.
No, this is one of the most asked questions. What's about unit test? And what also, what I actually, no one asked why there is not private. And the reason why I never do it private, because of unit tests. Unit tests live in the same package as the class. So they can very easily mock out all the implementation. And then I get the answer, okay, but the encapsulation is broken. It's like, no, because on the application server, just proxies are injected. You cannot access this instance. Impossible. If you cannot access this, no one can change it. But I still get the answer that it has to be private. Okay, then it's private card. Then I do it private for you, but it is not for technical reasons. Stateless, always proxy. Request code, always proxy. Okay, so I can change. So I use Mockito always, and then mock out the if there would be some behavior, I will mock it out, and there will be no difference between Java 8 tests and the usual Pojo test. This is why I didn't do this. Why? Then Archelian I use just for special cases. A special case would be this. Because if you think about this, injection of host, depending on some qualifier, is only testable as integration test. For this particular case, I would use Archelian, just for this. For testing of JPA, I will do the following. We have no time to implement this. persistence, create entity manager factory, create entity manager, and I will load the entity manager from a persistence XML from a local source test resources. If you would like to see some examples, look at my GitHub, and if you would like to see Archelian in action, Vaadin CDI. I was hired by Vaadin and I tested the whole UI with Vaadin and Archelian and Graphene. So sucks. It is slow. It's why Archelian is.
I was using Archelian a lot, and I was using CDI to give a try. Yes, and after a few weeks, I just give up because it wasn't working good. Yes, but it's maybe not a place for discussion about the Archelian and all.
After we are drunk, it is a place to discuss, but after we are drunk.
Yes, very good. So, any other questions? Should the next time just deliver here talk just about testing, or will be too boring? Just test. Actually, I do a workshop because I guess one day just about testing, from unit test to stress testing with in Munich. So just Munich. But I got because the question of unit test I cannot hear anymore because there's not a unit test. An integration test is just a very specific case which if you're building something challenging. In your case, it could be. If you have registry stuff like this, you have to configure. In most enterprise projects, doesn't matter. So then thank you for your patience, I would say, right? And I actually plan to hack more, but if you ask questions, even better. The excursus to SOA was somehow important because they asked the question, which no one denies, so it's okay. And now go to WJUG, right? And very short because I need some sleep. So last time I hacked until 3. So, okay, so see you.